Welcome to Story in a Bottle. I'm your host, Dan McElroy. Each episode, our guests are leading voices in tech, media, and entertainment. And to get to know them better, we share their favorite cocktails as they share their stories.
Sometimes it's so clear what we're meant to do from an early age. Without a doubt, that was true for Jessica Cohen. Her passion for journalism manifested itself when she was growing up in Detroit and hasn't wavered. Over Hendricks and Tonics, she talks about her early days with Gawker, the differences between startup journalism and veteran magazines, and how she's using political news video to reach a younger audience at the Recount.
Oh man, here we go. Here we go.
I know, right? Well, cheers. Welcome
Cheers.
to the show. Thanks for coming.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we're drinking, what are we drinking?
Hendricks.
Hendricks and tonic?
Yes.
Yeah. But it's not, it's a new Hendricks
It's
apparently.
the fancy Hendricks.
Yeah. What did you just smelled this?
It had like a fruity floral
Yeah.
scent to it. I would say almost lavender-esque. I mean, it reminded me of lavender laundry detergent. Like,
Okay. That's generally what I want in my
but like
gin.
in a boozy way.
Yeah.
Right.
It does taste fruity.
I don't know if
really-
I like it better or not.
I can't, it's different.
It's definitely different.
Because Hendricks has like a cucumber flavor to it normally, and this definitely has like a
It's fruitier.
raspberry or like a.
Yeah, I think I actually prefer the cuke.
I knew you struggled to figure out what to drink for this episode for many reasons. But what is is a gin and tonic your go-to?
Yeah,
It's actually
Yeah.
mine as well.
I would say it's my go-to. I mean, I'm definitely flirting a lot with mezcal,
Oh,
but it has to be like, a fancy mezcal cocktail or
well,
something.
yeah.
So
Not straight mezcal.
no, no. Mezcal with pineapple and a dash of jalapenos.
Well, look, I want to start talking about what you're doing now.
Mhm.
You're at the Recount, right? Is that
Right.
Yeah. So what I found interesting about the Recount is that it's all video.
Yeah.
And why I find that interesting, and what I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, is that I've done a lot of like user research in news and worked on a lot of media products. And video is always this challenge where
hmm
it's hard to do well, which you guys do well, but it's hard to do well. And it's work for the consumer sometimes. And this is not criticism. I'm just legit curious. So what, from your point of view, like why you diving all in video for the site?
Well, I should start by saying that the Recount does do some tags. We
Okay.
definitely do static on Instagram. It had like a newsletter for a while that I put on pause to shift some focus to video.
Fair.
But the reality is that news consumers, whether legacy media likes it or not, they are consuming through video, especially, like Gen Z and younger millennials as well. So, if we care about getting information to audiences that actually want information,
Yeah.
or at least want to have the information come across their desk, even if they're not like specifically seeking it out, we should be on video.
Sure.
Like that just makes sense. But you're right, it's resource intensive. It's difficult to do hard. It requires like both your traditional journalistic storytelling skills, but also technical skills. So it's not easy by any stretch. It definitely takes a village every day to put the Recount together, but it's a lean team and everybody's really passionate about the work. So we make it work.
Awesome. Well, I want to get more into this, but
Yeah.
for people who don't know what the Recount is, what's your like elevator pitch?
I didn't rehearse this. Our elevator pitch. We are a news, politics, and policy publisher for audiences under 40, I would say. We're very issues-first politics, lowercase p politics. Beltway bickering is always interesting to a certain audience, but we also know just all the data suggests that Americans are tuning out of news, and they're tuning out of politics news, particularly like election news. What we find is that audiences are still very much engaged with issues news. So if you make it less about Beltway bickering and more about the actual issue at hand, whether it's funding for Ukraine or women's reproductive rights or censorship in schools, audience was very much engaged with it.
And the good news is those aren't really big topics.
No.
Like,
I mean, we have nothing to do. There's nothing to talk about. But finding ways to talk about that story that doesn't, like those stories that don't naturally, like finding ways to talk about those stories that doesn't necessitate going through a Capitol Hill lens. That's key, I think, to keeping people invested in what's happening.
Well, your point about people being kind of out of touch with the news is first of all, very true and also disturbing because we are in an election year.
Right.
And from at least the things I listen to and read, most people aren't even thinking about the election right now. They're tuned out and they're dealing with their own lives.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But why do you think it is that people have shifted, or the Gen Z has shifted into video? I mean, social media might be part of it, maybe, but what do you think it is? That
I think social media drives most of it because it's TikTok at the end of the day. It's TikTok and YouTube Shorts and YouTube. And if you look how young people use YouTube, they use it like television.
Yeah.
Really, they
Yeah.
watch it on their TVs, but oftentimes like after school, after work. But I think that algorithms on social media just are so hyper attuned to every little user behavior.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get off those platforms. We know it's addictive. So if you're already on those platforms, that's where you're going to go for the news. Like nobody wants to have to open another app,
No, they don't.
right?
Yeah.
So the app I'm on, if it has news, then I'm going to find the news on that app. You said something as we started about video requiring more
Well,
of
I think
the
I said
user.
that. So what I meant by that is like
Yeah.
for some people, and maybe it's because maybe I'm thinking about older audiences, like
Yeah.
people scan text, right? They don't read full articles. They're like, I'm going to get what I want to get and then I want to get out.
Mhm.
Whereas video is work in that you have to know you're going to spend, would
Mhm.
it be a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes
Yeah.
to get the whole story? Because you can't really scrub a video. I mean, there is a technical. Oh, I know. Okay.
No, friends.
No, I know. I know that there. I know you can, but a lot of people don't scrub
Mhm.
videos for that because they older people especially. But I think you're right about younger people. So sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. Younger people absolutely scrub through videos,
Yeah.
and younger people are absolutely using every AI plugin for browsers possible to transcribe those videos for them. And
Yes.
the fact that there are chapters in YouTube now when you upload a video, I think that
Yeah.
very much has to do with it's an optimization technique, but for user experience, it allows users to jump around to the part that they care about.
Yeah.
If you are still searching for something on Google and the video comes up, Google is automatically selecting the part of the video that's more relevant to your search. I think individuals of a certain age, not us, but certainly, listen, like if we grew
we're
up,
young.
so very, very young, but if we came of age in digital media reading, that's always going to be easiest for us. Scanning is always going to be easiest for us. You and I, we were doing this before there was YouTube.
That's true.
Right. And I think that's why
Way
YouTube.
to call that out. Thanks.
Yeah. I know that we don't want to talk about these things.
No, but it's very true.
But it's very, very true. And I think we have generations now that have not, we know we have generations now that have not consumed media without YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's been there since day one.
It's literally a replacement for Google in a lot of ways for them.
Yeah.
Like my daughter is almost 10
Mhm.
and like the amount that she uses YouTube for everything,
Mhm.
The way that I would probably use Google, honestly, is astounding to me. And it's all video. And it's for her it is TV. I mean, she watches Disney Plus as well, but like she is always like searching for videos of something, whatever.
Right.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. I also it's generational, and I also think it's industry too. Right. Outside of media, I'm not sure people read as much as we like to think they do.
Oh, I don't think they do at all.
Right.
I mean, maybe they read social. Maybe they read like if they're on Facebook, which the younger people aren't, but on Instagram maybe.
Right.
But yeah, no.
No, I think video requires a lot of people who are not native to YouTube. I think it requires a lot of people who multitask. If you are on Slack and you've got your DMs on one other app and 33 tabs open, another tab that you skim and then go to a different screen and then go back to skimming, that's supernatural. I read 2 sentences of this paragraph. Now I have to go to Slack and answer like 6 different messages, and then I go back to the paragraph.
Yeah.
That's reading. Like that's easy.
Yes,
in a way.
agreed.
Video requires you to tune out that stuff, even for 30 seconds. And depending on how your brain works, that can be really challenging.
So does that mean, is your audience mostly, you said under 40, is it mostly kind of that Gen Z world?
I mean, it's like, Gen Z and elder millennial.
Younger millennials.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, a quarter of the way through the drink. Yes.
At least you didn't spill it yet.
No, I would say elder Gen Z through millennial. And, we have 1.1 million followers, and it's all across distributed and largely on social. And
do you know geographically where they are?
U.S.
I mean, so I figured
coastal. I mean, it's mostly coastal in the major cities. And I think but that's like, it tracks, but it's also news consumption period.
Oh yeah.
Right?
No. Yeah.
Like, and we have pockets of this country that's underserved by local news. We know this. Local news is the ongoing crisis.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes wonder if these areas of the country aren't getting news that interests them, that engages with them, if it makes them less likely to consume news, period, or get like they've lost the funnel into the news conversation.
Yeah, I mean, so I've done a lot of research on local news because I find it not because I find it fascinating. I'm lucky to have done that for clients, but what I've learned over the past few years is that even with local news, what people really want is crime news.
Yes.
They want high school sports news,
hmm
and they want to know about pets.
I was about to say dogs.
Yeah.
Yes. Dogs.
That's it. That's the site. And like, but the thing that's fascinating about local news is that the local news anchor is the most trusted person,
I know.
right?
They're in your living room
They're in your
every
living room.
night.
And they're not like, the big news person, the old school like Tom Brokaw guy.
Right.
They're like the local celebrity.
It's
And
Ron Burgundy.
It's Ron Burgundy.
It's
100%.
100% Ron Burgundy.
Yeah. And it's so scary that that's so true.
But I do wonder, like, how long is that going to be the case? Like, I'm talking like Ron Burgundy, I think is based on Bill Bonds from
that's
Detroit
right.
News. I
Yeah.
grew up watching Bill Bonds.
Right.
Like, I'm ancient.
Right. Because
Right?
local news implies you have a TV on.
Yeah,
Yes,
right. So
yes.
how many people, even under 50, are coming home after work and flipping on the local news? Right.
That's true.
So who are the anchors? I
And
couldn't tell you who our anchors are in New York.
Oh,
for
I know
any
it's
of the channels.
Pat Kiernan.
Well,
I mean,
he's a given. He's a
love it.
constant.
Yeah.
He's our constant.
Yeah. I think actually it's morning news. From like talking to
Mhm.
parents, a lot of people have the news on the background
Okay,
before kids go to school or before they go to work or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think anyone's coming home and doing that like 6 o'clock news or whatever
Right.
it was when we were kids. Like,
Yeah.
no way.
No. So those anchors, like, I'm curious how that trust and influence, what does that look like
Right.
in 15 years? It
That's a
may
great
be
question. I
non-existent.
mean,
I
do
don't
you
know.
guys use yourselves as personalities?
We have some people on staff that I would definitely say like shine in front of the camera. And I
Yeah.
do think it's important to have news delivered through faces
Mhm.
a lot of the time. Like humans connect with other humans. Politics and hard news in general can be a little dry or difficult to stomach, but if it's the human being is the delivery mechanism,
Yeah.
and if they can engage that is native to the platform you're on, like
Yeah.
you're much more likely to draw someone in.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
I buy that. I think that
Yeah.
personalities, especially more so than in TV or in video than in writing.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
I remember years ago working on Newsweek and got in this argument with he was like the digital editor.
Mhm.
And he was like, the most important part of the article is the byline. And I was like, that's not true. No one knows, unless you're like, at the time, like Fareed was the editor or John Meacham was the editor. It's like, sure, like big names. But for most people, they're like, I don't know who this
No.
is. And no one cares
No.
about you. And
No, I mean, like I think journalism has to kind of follow the lessons of the creator economy
Mhm.
in a lot of ways. It's not necessarily. It's certainly plenty of journalists have become stars on their own. So
Sure.
it's the Substack model. It's all of that. But even just newsrooms where you've got journalists appearing on camera, I think that really matters. It's the same sort of bond building as any creator or influencer is trying to build with their audience. And there's
Right.
no reason journalists can't do that, whether it's as their own personal brand or an emissary of a publishing brand.
I think that's right. I mean, do you find so right now we're in a situation where people don't consume news.
Yeah,
They don't
it's
know
a
what's
great
going
time,
on in
great time.
politics. News organizations are lacking eyeballs and money. Not saying you guys, but like in general. And yet we're in one of the most fascinating
Yeah.
political times in this country's history.
Mhm.
As you think about that, especially today, particularly being a historic day in
Oh,
the world of
goodness.
politics, right? Like,
Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, why were his eyes so red first thing in the
'cause
morning? Did you see these pictures?
he was up all night truthing. And then he
True.
woke up super early to truth some more
Yeah.
because he can't do it in court.
And he's going to be up late tonight truthing.
Oh, yes, he is.
So who knows how bad it looks
But
tomorrow.
he slept all day. He had a nice little nap.
Yeah, he
during
napped through the
during the
entire
trip.
thing.
Yeah. Like, how do you guys cover that, knowing you can't have video of the trial
hmm
in New York? What and how do you make it relevant, important to people who don't pay attention to the news?
I think the first point of entry is we watch so you don't have to.
Mhm.
So we're going to look for the sound bites, the clips, the moments that like if you don't want to pay any attention to this, but like you at least want to have an idea of what went on, those are going to be the short form videos that we pump out the door.
Yeah.
We were talking about in our morning meeting today, like what to watch for today to help us determine the nature of our coverage for the next couple weeks. Because jury selection, it's not going to go fast.
No.
And it's a lot of rooms behind the room, right? So it's still TBD what comes out of it. I think that also synthesizing what is being reported, like taking those tweets, taking dispatches from the journalists who are in the court. Like that's really important too. And if you can be in a place where you're putting that in front of the audience as opposed to them having to seek it out, that's the win.
Sure. So how did you do it today?
So today, we definitely, we clipped Trump. We are working on like aggregating exactly as I said, the reports coming out of the courtroom, deciding on like what images are worth seeing. Were there any good quotes? And then tomorrow morning, the big discussion is what is going to be our coverage strategy every day moving forward.
It's gonna be. I mean, the thing is, like, I believe that this is gonna be a roller coaster. That there's gonna be so many things that we don't know.
But a lot of people are like, I don't have time for this.
Right. Well, I think that's true. That's a metaphor basically for people's for politics in general.
Right.
Like people struggle, like especially they got like the middle of the country. People struggle with, making ends meet, like making their lives happen every day. Like thinking about Donald Trump is, unfortunately or unfortunately, like the last thing they want to do because they have shit to do. They have a life to live, and Washington, as you mentioned, Washington politics.
Yeah. And I think that with this first trial and first of what, 4 here?
Yeah.
The question that keeps coming up is, can he run from jail? Can he be president for jail? I don't think a lot of people like who are knee deep in politics, I don't think a lot of people are like particularly fascinated with the comings and goings of the courthouse.
Right.
I think they want to know, what does this mean for the big picture? What does this mean for the election? What does this mean for Trump's potential presidency?
Yeah.
It's about the stakes, not the horse race. And you could say the horse race is the election season, but you could also say that these trials are part of that horse race too. And I don't think people care about the horse race.
No, I think that they just want to make sure that they're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, much as I vocally am very against Donald Trump in every single way, I can understand. I can try to understand why people think, oh well, I was okay under him. And
a lot of people feel that way, right? A lot of people feel that way. A lot of people had a better tax situation. A lot of people had different jobs. A lot of people felt that they were being spoken to. And we shouldn't discount that. So for those people, like whether they think the trial is a sham or not, at the end of the day, is my preferred candidate does he still have a chance?
Right.
What does this mean for me? It all gets down to that like fundamental question, really, that most newsrooms should be thinking about with any story, no matter what vertical you're playing in, is what does it mean for me, the viewer, the user, the reader?
Because most people are one issue voters.
Yeah. Single issue voters, and really like any news story, anything you cover, like some reader or viewer needs to be able to see themselves in it.
That's
in
a really
some
good point.
Indirect way.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. So you have this passion, obviously, for what you do, and that's great. Not everyone does in their lives. But I was looking through your career history, and I mean, it's from the get go. Like you're like jumping on things. So you said you grew up in Detroit?
Yeah, a suburb, Royal Oak, Michigan.
So growing up in Detroit, I assume we're somewhat close in age, because we have known each other tangential at least for almost 2 decades.
I think we are
close.
Yeah, close.
So you're growing up in the 80s, like, watching news.
Bill Bonds on Detroit
yeah.
local news, yeah.
Does the passion for journalism start there? Or what were you thinking growing up? Like what you want to do?
I grew up in a super media heavy household without realizing it.
Oh, that's interesting.
My mother was like an optician. My father was an attorney. But I was surrounded my entire life from very young age by magazines and books. I was a total bookworm, but I loved The Atlantic. It was like the little kid reading The Atlantic
like
in 1990. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So like an Atlantic that resembles very little about the current Atlantic, but nevertheless, like I was into The Atlantic. I read the newspaper every morning before school, starting in elementary school. Like I remember Harper's Bazaar being on, like the coffee table. There were a lot of periodicals in my house, and I was a voracious reader as a kid, and that was another thing for me to read, and I really, really loved it. Absolutely. And I was always writing books and stories as a little kid, for sure. Like
writing books.
Yeah, book. But the audience cannot see me making air quotes right now. But
I get it.
I
wrote some books when I was a kid as well.
Like weird little stories and everything. So
I illustrate. Well, I didn't illustrate them. My friends illustrated. I would write. So we had
I did it all.
Yeah.
I did it all.
Nice.
I'm a dynamic talent like that from a very young age.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So by the time I got to high school, it was like, yes, I love journalism. I ran the paper. I did all of that. I went to journalism camp. Most people go to like camp. I went to journalism camp.
I don't, you know, I've never heard of that, and I'm surprised I've never heard of journalism. I would
Are
have
you
done
really
that.
surprised?
I'm surprised I've never heard of it. I'm not surprised it exists.
I have no idea if this is like an industry. I just Michigan State had a journalism camp. So
Okay.
like,
What? How long is it? A week? Is it a summer? Like, what is that?
I think it was like a week. I went 2 years in a row, loved it. And it was very funny because like at journalism camp, you'd learn about doing,
This is
for the record,
this is the
I've
best
never
part of the
actually
conversation.
talked about journalism camp. I also went to soccer camp.
yeah.
just
No
for
one
the
cares about
record.
that. No one cares.
No one
Let's go back to
cares.
journalism camp.
Journalism camp. You know, we talked, like, it was interesting because it was all student journalists from various high schools. And it was like talking about like reporting on the party that got busted and this and that. And I went back to my school and talked about like, we need to report on like,
To your newspaper.
yeah, to my peers,
Sure.
essentially telling them if they got busted by the cops at a party one weekend, I think we should write a story. And the blank stares I got were like epic.
Oh.
So, you know, I was very cool and popular. Everyone loved me.
That tends to be the case. You know, the hardcore journalist at your
Mhm.
school.
It was a lot of fun, but
Did you study journalism in college or
no, I didn't. I ended up just going straight English major. I didn't do the student paper or anything like that.
Really?
No, I went to University of Michigan and kind of had a moment where I was like, I don't know that I actually want to be a journalist.
Mhm.
So I didn't do the paper. I just kind of like floated around and just did general English because I really loved English. I really loved literature. I really loved like, you know, lit crit and all that dorky stuff.
Yeah.
And so college was just kind of like that period of like, just whatever, learning some stuff, doing some things, nothing terribly impressive or illustrious.
Right.
So, and I kind of always assumed that I would just end up in law school because that's what you do.
Sure. And your dad was an attorney.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
but no pressure from him or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was just like, that's what you do.
Yeah, sure. That's
That
that's
was-
how the career path goes.
Like everyone I met, all my friends, that was just obvious thing is obvious.
Mhm.
So I didn't really do the student paper or anything like that. I just went for like your, you know, picture perfect liberal arts education.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I mean, well, there are some things wrong with it, but
I enjoyed my liberal arts education.
oh, I loved it.
I would do it
Absolutely.
again. No, not at this age, but if I had to repeat doing that, I would.
No, I absolutely loved it. I loved
Yeah.
Michigan. I had a
Yeah.
great time. But it wasn't really till a few years out of school where I realized like, oh yeah, journalism. That was the thing I really loved.
Right, right.
So,
What? How did that kind of transpire? So you did teach for America? Is that
yeah, I
right?
did teach for America in South Central LA, which I think now we just call South LA.
Yep.
But
Yeah, it's nice now.
yeah, so I taught high school there. That was really intense. Teach for America is a well-meaning program, certainly, but I would say the ends do not necessarily justify the means. So, but listen, like it was the most eye-opening, wonderful experience, and I loved being around the kids,
Mhm.
and it was phenomenal. But I ended up after finishing that, I went and took a desk job at 20th Century Fox because it was LA. and,
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you did. You went to law school, and then you didn't
And
go
you
to
go to-
law school,
And you did
then
the entertainment route.
yeah,
of
and then you
course.
end up on the studio lot. So
Right,
I was
right.
just like a desk jockey. I was like getting omelets for my boss every morning as she like sent her, like would call me from Topanga Canyon and terrible cell phone, like as if she had to tell me that she wanted an egg white omelet. I knew it was the
Right.
same every day. It was business affairs, so it wasn't particularly like glamorous or anything.
Yeah.
But I did that for a year, and while I was there, you know, outside of pilot season, I sat there a lot. It was really boring.
Mhm.
So I spent a lot of time on the internet, and this was 2003. Blogs were just starting to be a thing.
Mhm.
You know, it was kind of like my first real exposure to like salon and all of that stuff. You know, I was definitely online as a very young kid. We had Prodigy in my house. Like
Awesome. Yeah.
I was
sure.
10 years old. I was online. I was on the message boards. Like I've always been a total dork
Seems a
for
little
that
creepy,
stuff.
but
Yeah, it probably was. A parent should have been in the room.
Right,
Definitely.
right, yeah.
But that's okay. My parents did the best they could.
No, I mean, look, I think that's the coolest thing about our generation is that we actually were those kids on the
Oh, yeah.
internet at in non-age appropriate time, but it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad because it wasn't anything yet.
Yeah.
Right? It was
Yeah.
just community
Right.
at that point.
Right.
A million different weird little communities.
Yeah.
Which I guess isn't that different than how it is now. It just took a really circuitous path to get there.
Yeah.
But
And I think the communities are wider ranging.
yeah.
Well, they're pretty wide ranging in the late 90s, early 2000s, I'll say. I found some things in my boss's search history when I was working in like 1996, and I was like, oh, you're on some interesting message boards.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was like overeducated, underemployed, and sitting there all day and just reading the internet for hours and realizing, oh God, I really miss this. I miss writing. I miss talking about current events. I miss this like entire craft that I was really passionate about as a younger adult, but just kind of like put to the side. So I decided to apply to journalism schools, got accepted to all of those, and
Humble brag.
yeah, humble brag. I was extremely desirable student. It was because they knew I could both write and illustrate my own stories.
That does make a difference. It's the illustration aspect that just puts you over the top.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, to get everywhere. But got into like, Columbia, and that was the whole plan. So I'm going to go to Columbia. That's that.
Right.
Like super exciting. And in the meantime, I had started a blog because that's just what you did. It was 2003.
Sure.
Like, let's
prime blog time.
Oh my God, peak blog.
Yeah.
Early peak blog, right?
Yeah,
So I had my little blog spot.
Sure.
And I would write about random stuff in my life. I would also write some commentary on news or recaps of the OC. That's
also important at that time.
Very important at that time. But it was fascinating in hindsight because it picked up an audience just by writing.
But you could do that back then.
Yeah, you could do that
now
back
that
then.
would be much harder.
Well, and it ended up opening every door for me.
Right.
So I ended up getting contacted by Corey Sika, who was the editor of Gawker at the time, and Nick Denton, the publisher of Gawker.
Sure.
And they said, we heard you're going to move to New York. Do you have any plans? And I said, yes, my plan is to go to Columbia. And they said, well, why don't you, any interest in editing Gawker instead? And my parents were so disappointed and angry, but I decided to take the job.
As someone who went to Columbia Journalism School, you're good.
Very expensive for 1 year.
Yes. Very expensive 1 year. I have a very complicated relationship with Columbia.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Why is that?
I mean, I have a lot of really good friends who I made at that school, and I'm very glad to have made those.
Yeah.
I had a very not great experience as a student there, particularly because I went there to study. I think I got in because of my internet experience, and it was their new media program I just started. And at the time, I knew a lot more about the internet than maybe my professors did, and it made for a very complicated
I can imagine.
experience because I'd be like, what if we told stories this way? What if we did this? And they're like, nope, you're not allowed to do this. And I'm like, but like, what if we did? It would make it better for the user. I didn't know that I was like a UX person. I just was like, I want to tell stories in this way. And it just made it for like fights. And it's not good when you get into fights with your professor.
No, not good. But that must have been frustrating for you too, right?
Great,
like, I mean, that was definitely, I can probably guess. What year was it?
1998, 99.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was the beginning of a very long period of media sticking its head in the sand.
Oh, the stories I could tell you.
Oh,
and you
likewise.
know, and the ones you know. Yeah. I mean, that time, first of all, I'm very happy to have been a part of that time because I feel like as someone who still works in media, and that you do as well, like I know the mistakes.
Yes.
And I see them happening again and again.
Yep.
It's kind of shocking. It's like that definition of insanity, right? Like, really? Okay. But also, I remember seeing like this at Columbia being like, you're supposed to be like the precipice of thought leadership in journalism. And I got into this fight for years with them. I was like, why aren't you teaching people the business of journalism? Like, why is there no class in how to make how to run a profitable
because that's
company?
Publishing, and that's separate. That's an entirely separate program.
Sure,
at
it
Columbia.
is. Sure, it is.
No,
The business school, yeah.
Which is wild.
But if you think about how like people graduate from writer to editor to editor and once you get up there, like you are part of the business, like whether you like it or not. And I was always like, you got mid-career people coming here. Forget about me. Like I'm 21. What the hell do I know? But like they're like 30, 35, 40-year-olds in the school who could benefit significantly.
Yes.
And it frustrated me so much for years. I would get into arguments on like the J school threads. It doesn't matter.
No,
but it's such a problem with, I'm sure it's true of other schools, but like I teach, I lecture down at UGA about like once a semester, and they have an amazing program there where they teach the business of journalism.
That is so important.
So important.
So important. I think obviously the separation of church and state is everything, but it
Mhm.
doesn't mean journalists can't put on their big girl pants
Right.
and learn about what's happening on the other side of the fence.
Right.
If you really think that's going to threaten your ability to objectively report the news, then I would question your backbone.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And I think newsroom leadership on the editorial side, if you're an EIC and you don't know how your business runs, I don't have words for that.
The amount of times I
necessarily.
can tell you where I've gone into a redesign for a media company and you're meeting with the EIC and they're basically like, we're going to get rid of all of the ads and we're going to start from scratch. And I'm like, I know this game. In about 3 weeks, we're going to come in and you're going to have talked to your publisher or your sales, director of sales, and they'll be like, we can't get rid of all the ads. That's how we make money. Even if you want to rethink your revenue strategy, you're still not going to get rid of them because it's how you make money.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and I just am like this, if you took a second to think about your business, you know, I can understand like not wanting an ad for something bad served up next to a certain article. Like I can get that, but the technology is there. We're not dealing with that anymore. So it's like, come on. Like,
but I've been amazed to find how many people don't even understand the technology or why that ad showed up in the first place.
right. Yeah.
Right.
No, totally.
You know, I feel like for a lot of editors, the understanding of business models kind of ended at page views and programmatic.
Well, because
a little bit,
page
right?
views they're good for your ego.
Yeah, they're very.
Yeah.
It is a vanity metric,
Totally,
right? Like I'm not gonna lie, I love it too. Feels
Who
great.
doesn't love it?
Who doesn't want people seeing their work?
I like downloads
totally
on this
get it.
podcast. I'm excited about it. You know what I
But
mean?
breadth is not depth,
No.
and depth is what monetizes right now. So
Well-
I think like lead editors, as soon as they understand the implications of all of that and what that means,
Yeah.
it makes them better editors because they start thinking about what kind of initiatives.
Right.
If I have a open playing field as an editor to do anything, like, you know, this helps define some lanes, right? It doesn't mean you're kowtowing to advertiser interests. It doesn't mean you're compromised at all. Like, it just means you're being smart about how you use your resources. And, you know, that high horse preciousness about not having anything to do with that.
Yeah.
I think the quickest way you fall off your high horse is when you have to do the layoffs.
That is very true.
Right. And I should say I absolutely respect and understand the discomfort
Sure.
surrounding all of this for sure. I feel it, right? But at the same time, if we can't figure out how to keep the lights on hand in hand with our commercial partners and our own business, then I mean, goodness, what does that mean for the newsroom?
Right. So let's go back to you got a call from Nick. And, you know,
it was actually an instant message, an AOL instant message.
even
Yeah.
how did they have that?
I don't know.
That's weird.
In hindsight, I don't know. I'm sure they asked some blogger intermediaries or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like so I don't know if you ever looked at the history of this show, but we have had a lot of the Gawker people on here. I feel like I'm like collecting the Gawker stories, you know, to be told. So you decide to forego J School, smart decision, to go to Gawker. And Gawker, this was what, 2004?
Yeah.
So like, first of all, Gawker as an institution from 2000, when did it start? 2002, 2003?
I think so too, yeah.
Yeah. To when it folded in 2016, like RIP really, like correct me. Like I think that it was such of its time. And when they tried to relaunch it twice, it did not do well because it wasn't filling the media gap that it needed to, or that the old Gawker did. So like when you came in 2004, what are you thinking? Like, what are you looking at? What are you like? What are you like? This is what I want to do with this publication.
You know, I was definitely given a mandate to scale.
Okay.
For sure.
Nick liked that.
Yes. Nick loved scale for sure. But you know, it was grow the site, and it was very media centric, and that was definitely like part of the job. But it was also, you know, the way to grow is to be strategic about posting and what you're posting and when, and develop like encourage your readers to develop daily habits around this brand.
Sure.
But then also posting things that are going to bring more people in from outside the Manhattan media bubble.
Right.
So that was kind of where it was. But I am happy saying on the record, I had no clue what I was doing. I mean, it was 20 years ago this summer,
that's
actually,
crazy.
which is wild. But yeah, you know, and I think Nick really liked that. Nick liked the outsider perspective. That was
Yeah.
very much Elizabeth. That was very much Corey. I would say I knew about 1/8 as much as they did. And I came in super outsider, right?
I mean, I think Elizabeth said she went in. She was working in finance.
Yeah, no,
before
it's-
she started doing it.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, but I like, at least she had been living in New York. Like,
Okay, yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah, that's fair.
Like
That's fair.
I moved to I was going to move to New York
Yeah,
anyhow for school, but I ended up
Right.
moving for this job. And I think, I blogged in the dark, ghost blogging for a while, but it was only a matter of weeks before it went live.
right.
So I definitely like learned how to be the Gawker voice while doing Gawker itself, which is not easy. Like, I mean, it's trial by fire and it can be brutal at times. And I think I, in turn, got a
brutal,
little brutal myself.
brutal in that the way that Gawker, the voice being brutal, or like
The
it's
feedback.
oh yeah. I mean,
You know what? Fair enough, though. This was a site that like dished it out like as a point of purpose.
Yeah.
That was part of the mission.
That's
so
right.
you better believe you're going to get it back in. If you don't, like, you're going to receive that back at you from these extremely loyal readers if you don't meet their expectations. So it did like really light a fire under my ass to get better.
and they
fast.
became almost part of the process, right? As time
Oh,
went
totally.
on, like the commenting community.
Yeah, we opened
became-
up, we created, there was a commenting system that was launched. It was invite only for a while.
Right. There were
Um,
levels.
There were levels, but the level of dialogue, even outside of the comments, just the emails, the number of emails that came in every single day with tips or links. It was like having human RSS feeds
God,
just
I'm sure.
send you everything they saw in the post that morning, even though I just saw it too. But sorry, I keep tenants. They would send you clips, like they'd send all the clips from the post or all the links that they saw that morning, even if they were the links I saw too already myself. But
Right.
because they were so eager to hear, like, see what Gawker would say about it.
Mhm.
Right? Like, that's in hindsight, particularly as I've worked at larger and larger organizations, that's actually like, I try not to be too sentimental about Gawker because, let's be honest, it was like a mess. But
It had its
but there was
issues.
something kind of special about that part of media and
Right.
people being so passionate about a voice and a brand and the voice of that brand, etc., that they'd be like, I want to hear what you have to say about Stuck Magazine.
Right.
Like,
Right.
said nobody ever, except then during that point in time.
Right. Well, the other thing that I think was interesting about Gawker, how long were you at? I know that you also were editor of Jezebel.
Yeah.
But how long were you editor of Gawker itself?
2 years.
2 years, and then right to Jezebel, or
No, I left to go to Vanity Fair
okay, right,
for a while, and then I was at New York Mag
right,
for a long
and then you
stretch.
came back and did
Yeah, launched the cut and did all that cool stuff, and then
right,
ended up going back for Jezebel.
because the Gawker properties,
Mhm.
the thing that I always find fascinating with them, and I don't think this is true of any other publication at its time, right? It's so much better.
So much better.
Yeah. Is that like I feel like that team, yourself included, was the I don't know, I guess like the line, the spot between where media and tech met. Like, not just because you had all the parties on your roof. I mean, you did, but
Though certainly.
but that it was like literally like, to me, it was like this weird glue that brought these two again, because it wasn't just the Gawker writers. I mean, there were other people in media
Mhm.
who were part of that, but it was really interesting to me that, like, in addition to having this really strong voice and this really strong, way to jab things in society,
Mhm.
it also was at this time when tech is getting exploding in New York again and getting kind of, and the internet's exploding again, and somehow, like, you guys were the cultural center of that. Well, do you agree with that, first of all? And
It's hard for me to nod along with that because I was in it so deep that, like,
Yeah.
I think a feature of almost everyone who ran Gawker, if not truly everyone, is like some very sincere humility and perspective about it. So it's really difficult for me to be like, yeah, we were the epicenter, man. That's where it all happened. I'm like, no, I really was a pajama clad blogger who got dressed at 5 and then went to the roof party.
right,
Right? Like, we
Yeah.
all were. But yes, in hindsight, there was like something definitely happening there. And part of that was just being first,
right,
right? The first, network and building from that. And Nick looking at audience in a different way and really encouraging us to just shoot first, ask questions later. Just
that
go,
was
go,
definitely
go.
the Gawker way.
Yeah.
Often,
To its detriment, yes.
Yes,
But
that-
like, yeah.
yes, and not just because of that, literally the case that they
Mhm.
lost, but I think some mistakes that were made before that.
Oh, sure.
were, like,
yeah. Yeah. But like, it was chase traffic and be smart about it And it wasn't necessarily do whatever it takes
Right.
to get traffic. It was do whatever it takes that's also smart and clever and
Right.
on brand.
And you created really, and I don't know which parts of you created, but like they were franchises within the Gawker. I mean, specifically Gawker.com, not Jezebel or Deadspin or anything, that were like Gawker Stalker, for example, stuff like that, were like fun things you wanted to come back to check every day.
Yeah, like sub brands,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
you said it, they were franchises.
Yeah.
Like so it wasn't just that you were a Gawker fan, you were a fan of this one specific thing,
Mhm.
right? And that very much like mimics what magazines were. Like you loved the front of the book, or you loved the cartoon.
Right. By like
the New Yorker
Chocolate
was-
Town and the New Yorker.
Yeah,
or like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So if you're publishing 12 to 24 times a day, having a few touch points that people can always be looking for, coming back to, because you shouldn't assume the audience is keeping up with literally every single thing that you post.
Right.
Like a lot of them are dropping in when they can and keeping an eye out for the thing they love.
Right.
And oftentimes it's the thing they love that keeps them coming back, because everything else in between that could be really irregular.
Right.
Right? Gawker, we were all very hit or miss. When we hit, we were amazing. When we miss, oh my God. God help you.
That's true.
God help us.
Well, so when you're in Gawker for a couple of years and then you go to Vanity Fair, right? And then New York Mag, I imagine, especially since like Gawker's your first real media experience, other than the high school newspaper, which obviously, different situation.
Right. Very important work.
What is it like to go to like that kind of, from that craziness of Gawker to an established, especially like Vanity Fair, which is like such a institution, I'm sure very much more corporate from a magazine standpoint. Like, how do you, what is that transition like for
I
you?
mean, I came out of Gawker completely feral.
I bet.
100% feral, because that was my first New York City job.
Yeah, it helps you get, I'm sure it help you get to know the city really well too.
I mean, from my apartment,
Right.
like from my 6th floor walk up, going from the Lower East Side to Nick's Place in Soho every day. That was my world. That was it.
Right, very minor, very minimal.
I was like, oh, Condé Nast, Bryant Park. What's this park you talk about? I had no clothes. I had like, I wore the same.
Because you were in your pajamas all day.
Yeah, like truly, I had like the same 3 outfits. I just rotated based on
You
who
were
I was
doing
seeing.
COVID before it was cool.
Guess it kind of was, for better or worse, but I would say worse. But so it was like a real shock to the system, much needed for one's professionalism, for sure.
For sure.
But I cannot think of like a more extremely different place to go from Gawker Media than to Condé Nast.
Oh, sure. And
to
that's
4 Times Square.
And that's, if I'm timing this right, is that in their time that when they were doing that huge redesign project?
I was
2006,
there.
2007?
It was I went there in 2006. Condé Net was starting to break out, and like I remember Condé Net was talking to me a lot about like various things with web designing and planning. So it was just I mean, obvious thing is obvious to say, it was very different, but
Sure.
culturally, Gawker, I mean, I burned out. It was exhausting. It was crazy. It wasn't always good, but it was always fun. Always fun. Like sometimes that fun would be like a little too intense for a human being, but like, in hindsight, every day was fun in its own way. Every day was a little bit different. Everything was always interesting. That's not like real life in media.
That's very true.
It could be, maybe, but everything I've ever experienced outside of that company, no. So Vanity Fair was like, it felt so slow to me. And this is by not the fault of the company or anything. It's just going from a place where you have an idea, you conceive it, you can do it. That's it. It's done. Click publish.
It's also magazine publishing versus blog / internet publishing.
Like the editorial processes to me at that time seemed so Byzantine, and everything's so glacial. And, one person says they like this fun idea, but that 73 other people have to approve it. And it's so complicated and this and that. And like, also, it was Condé Nast in the mid-aughts. It was peak Devil Wears Prada territory. I was so out of my depth in a lot of ways. I'm glad I did it. Vanity Fair, like that was one of the magazines I grew up reading. I thought it was my dream job. And I'm actually really glad I went at that point in my life, because it just, it was eye-opening in the best possible way. Like, I think it's so important to figure out what you don't want to do, or what kind of professional or person you aren't at that point in life, because you could kind of, in your career, when you're so early in your media career, there are like 7,000 different directions you can go, and it's the same role, but it's going to look different everywhere you go. So for me, I was able to like see very quickly where I do and don't fit in the industry and at that time,
Yeah.
like, because again, feral.
Right.
But New York Mag, when they came knocking, it was clearly like a more the environment was more ready to embrace digital. Adam Moss was
It's
like,
like, what, like a year later or something like that?
yeah,
Or-
about a year later.
Yeah.
Adam Moss was like asking me what I thought the future of digital video was. Like nobody was talking about that yet.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like
No,
outside of
video-
online only companies.
Video
but-
was especially like 2007, like it still was a challenge. you
yeah,
know? I
totally.
mean,
And I remember actually in my interview being like, I'm not sure yet.
and
Ask
it
me
was
in a year.
it was around that time. It was 2008, I think, when CNN did that big redesign. Remember where they went just all in on video, and their page views just tanked because it was the world. The world wasn't ready for it.
Mm-mm.
Consumers certainly, we weren't dealing with Gen Zers. We weren't
No.
dealing with interesting video, and
Right.
like, and it felt like I'm not here for this. Like,
No.
you know,
Yeah, 100%. So New York Mag felt like it was like right brand fit, like voicier, moved a bit faster,
Yeah.
like wanted to have some more fun with some of the content and everything. So that was where I went next. And I was there for a good 3 years, and that was incredible. That was probably like one of the most important professional experiences.
why? What about it? Like,
To be at a publication like staffed by such legends and such like storied history, but also to be there at a moment where it's at a turning point in terms of how it models itself, and to be there at that point where, they had an editor-in-chief who understood digital is where it's going to be, even if it's not there at this exact moment in 2007.
Yeah.
Just you wait. He knew. Like, he
Yeah.
totally knew. We didn't know the details. But that was really great to be in an environment like that. It was also, like, really interesting to be in an environment where, like, not everybody was on board with that. Not everybody wanted to be on the website.
it wasn't. I mean, if you think about it, I would say for the first 10 years of the 2000s, at least, but probably definitely the first 10 years, it was looked down upon. Like,
Yeah.
publishing on the web was not
Right.
as prestigious as publishing in print.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And I don't think it was till we launched The Cut and kind of really started making a mark during Fashion Week that some of the more like prestige writers were like, oh, yeah, let's make sure we get this online. Or yes, I'll write something just for
Mhm.
Daily Intel or whatnot.
Right.
So that was like just being there at that moment and watching that shift. It was like it was a very interesting time in media. It was a very interesting time, I think, just to see writers adapt
Yeah.
to speaking to their audiences in a very different new way, and seeing also like from like an org perspective, just the psychology of how teams interact and adapt with one another, like in the intensity of a newsroom,
Yeah.
but the complete wild west of what media was at that point.
Like
with digital.
publishing digitally. Oh yeah. It
Yeah.
was so crazy back then.
Yeah, it
And
was great, but it was really cool.
It was, and you guys in New Yorker, I'm sorry, New York Mag was one of the first, I think, publications like you said with The Cut, like to create similar to Gawker, like franchises that
Yeah.
became
Vulture.
almost as Vulture is a great example. Also,
Yeah.
of things that became businesses within themselves,
Yeah.
and destinations, no matter what, destinations of them in themselves.
Yeah.
That you kind of got in magazines, but no one had been doing it online.
Right. And the executives, like, they knew that's where it was heading. That was part, like, when things took off, it was like, there was a moment where it's like, we're going to start thinking about doing this. And, like, even to a lot of us there, it was like, whoa, vulture.com?
Right.
Whoa.
Whoa. It's a separate website? Wait,
Whoa,
what?
whoa, whoa, whoa. Slow down there, cowboy. But, I mean, obviously it was the right thing to do. But it
course.
was to be in a traditional magazine environment with people who are forward thinking like that was really brilliant.
So why go back then to the craziness of the Gawker world?
I still kind of missed it.
I mean, that's not surprising.
No, I still kind of missed it. I was also getting like I loved what Anna Holmes had built.
Mhm.
I loved Jezebel. I was at a place in my life where I was like, I'm still passionate about women's issues, but at that point, I think I was 30, and so much of the conversations felt really deeply personally relevant to just, Jezebel was never my personal thing, but I just felt very emotionally and personally invested in those beats and that kind of content.
Yeah.
And, I saw a growth trajectory there. So, I kind of had a standing offer to return at any point. So after about 3 years, I took them up on that.
Smart. I mean,
Yeah.
Jezebel's, first of all, what do you think about what's going on with it today? We had Lauren, who's the current editor, on a few weeks ago. Who I didn't know. Didn't hug her. Didn't know her.
Didn't know.
But she went through the situation where they shut it down and then
Really difficult, probably the most difficult part of the Jezebel journey. And literally nothing about that site has been easy.
no. Shocking, but yeah, you're right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Like amazing things. But like, I'm not sure there's ever been a easy, dull moment in the larger history of Jezebel.
Yeah.
I think that was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, just as like the Silent Alumni Network here. Like, it was like this very sad thing. There were endless obits, and then you hear Paste is going to rescue it. And I messaged a former colleague, and I was like, "So are they going to put corrections on the 75 articles that have been written about like the demise of Jezebel?"
Right. Right.
So it was a whiplash.
Yeah.
It was definitely a whiplash. And where it's at now, like obviously Paste a much better place for it.
Oh my God.
And
The nightmare that Geo Media is and was is I've talked to a lot of people from over there, not just from Jezebel, just from that world. And it sounds like, it's the classic bad media environment that we have in this.
It's the worst case scenario, venture capital page views.
Yeah.
Right. Or no, sorry, private equity.
Private equity.
Yeah, right. Excuse me. But I think it's really important that brands like Jezebel exist. Like that's the TLDR.
Yeah.
It's really important that those spaces exist and that those conversations are happening somewhere. What I hope is that those conversations are reaching women, anyone who's actually not already in on that conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, as media has become more fragmented, as we have like politically in ruins at this point, like as the echo chambers get more and more, they get louder and more separated, like farther and farther apart.
Right.
Like, I think Jezebel's power to like reach outside that bubble and not just preach to the choir, but get new people to join the choir. I think that's like the big thing that needs to happen right now. And I hope it is happening.
I mean, I feel like it's a ripe opportunity for, again, not the new Gawker, because that's not filling the need, but that those kind of edgy voices, those like that we need those now.
Yes.
More than ever.
Yeah. 100%. And I guess, my question is like, what is the distribution mechanism for what is the hot distribution mechanism for 2024 that's going to ensure that those voices get to audiences that actually really could benefit from hearing them?
Well, how do you, you're running a media site.
It's video. I really think video is so important, and it does not have to be high lift production.
Oh, I mean, that's what we're like. That's the beauty of social is that it doesn't have to be high quality. When I say quality, I don't mean the quality of the journalism. I mean the quality of the video, right? Like you don't need to do high production value,
right?
To actually, oftentimes when you do, it performs worse.
Right. Yeah. I have been very interested in like what outlets like Business Insider, and like The Atlantic have done, where it's literally they just put their journalists in front of the camera to talk about a story a little more in depth. And I think that's like so smart and simple and super engaging. Like you're not trying to win the comedy wars or anything.
Right.
Like you have the right hook. It's not like a rocket science to like structuring a video, but like get the hook in place, get the opener in place, and then just let the journalists talk. Yeah. And that can be really good, engaging content. So like, I think, for all the written work that's happening, thinking what's next for those ideas and where can we spread them? Like, where can we seed them? Like, you can't ignore TikTok.
No. I mean, hopefully it doesn't get shut down.
No. I mean, it's interesting. We did an exclusive thing at the Recount. We did a poll with Opinium, polling agency Opinium, and 7 out of 10 adults who use TikTok use it for news.
That doesn't surprise me.
I thought that was pretty surprising.
I think it's interesting. I mean, it makes me happy that they can find that they're finding news. Like however they're finding it, and I mean, that's one of the reasons I probably avoid TikTok, because I don't want to go down that news rabbit hole. I already have Twitter for that.
Interesting.
Well, because I follow so many journalists on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm already like,
well, you and I are not normal.
No.
In many ways.
No one's ever described me as normal.
No, but particularly when it comes to media consumption.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have the TikTok users, the majority who are on there are looking for news. And the poll we did also found that if TikTok does go away, they're all headed to YouTube.
But to your point earlier, that does make sense.
It tracks, right?
So you spend time at Jezebel, but then you also leave Jezebel to go to Mashable, right?
Yeah.
Right.
No, I left. I was at a company called Vocative
Oh,
for a
Vocative
little
was
while.
first. Sorry, I
Yeah,
flipped off in my
Vocative
head.
for a little while, and then Mashable. I was at Mashable for 5 years.
What I mean, it seems like you have found this place between the Recount, Vocative, Jezebel, Gawker, Mashable. Like these are well, they're not startups anymore, but
No.
but they were like much more non-traditional media. Let's say that.
Yeah.
What was it about Vocative and Mashable that really attracted you and got you away from Gawker, the Gawker world again?
I just wanted to do things differently. Vocative was really interesting to me because of the technology they had for
Yep.
journalism and for sourcing stories. So that appealed to me. I was also interested in running a newsroom that had more international news coverage and maybe getting out of like the women's media bubble for a little bit and taking a breather.
What was for those who don't know? We'll talk about like Vocative's.
Oh, Vocative was a site that had like kind of like a deep web technology to source interesting stories and social listening type.
Mhm.
Before there was social listening software, there was this stuff. So we would do a lot of interesting things on like fixing soccer matches or underground wrestling, gay wrestling communities, things like that. Just finding groups online that weren't necessarily wanting to be found
Yeah.
and using that as a point of entry, like to do some really interesting features reporting. And then Mashable, there was an opportunity to run like a really large newsroom that was like a global newsroom. We had bureaus in, at that time it was like London and Sydney and Singapore and LA and San
Wow.
Francisco and New York. And I couldn't really turn down the idea of like having that sort of like scale. And they had just gone through their like the infamous pivot to video,
Mhm.
but there was still this huge newsroom looking to like figure out what is the voice now and what do we focus on now that we've like been, it got leaner, but it was
Sure.
still huge. And I was really intrigued by the idea of like figuring out that voice and what is that brand now, like they're pivoting to video, but I'm not running video. I'm
Right.
dealing with the newsroom. And what are the areas of coverage that we can really own? And like, what is Mashable now at this point? I think it was 2016 when I went there. And the site had been around forever.
Yeah, I mean, I was
Right?
going to ask you, like, when I think about Mashable, I mean, for years, it was one of my, like, this is a site I have to visit every day. Like, along with TechCrunch, along with
Yeah.
Gawker, whatever.
Right.
Like, for you, thinking about as you take over Mashable and what is the slice of the media diet, if you will, that Mashable you're trying to help it fill?
Oh, goodness. I think it was a kind of that intersection between tech and culture, but a little bit lighter.
It was definitely, it's definitely lighter.
Yeah, definitely lighter. We still leaned hard on consumer tech reporting. But I thought of it more instead of like for hardcore first adopters, it's early adopters,
Mhm.
right? It's not people who want to consume memes all day, but want to understand what's happening online in
Yeah.
a given day. It's also people who are interested in kind of like the conversations that are starting to happen, but haven't gone mainstream yet
Mhm.
in terms of like, one of the series we did that I was really proud of was the team put together a thing called Small Humans, and it was all about parenting and tech, but
Oh.
which sounds like duh
Yeah.
right now, but like in 2017 when Alexa was just starting to be in everyone's homes,
Mhm.
like we forgot how quickly these things happen.
Right.
So I don't mean to imply it was like super ahead of the curve, but it was like starting to elevate those conversations on a really big site, a really big
Yeah.
domain. And then, a lot of like, just like, what is the general news today that people are talking about? Mashable was hardly a politics site, but I got the Trump bump, just like everybody else.
Yeah, I
Right.
never felt like Mashable was political. I think
No.
it's actually one of the things I liked about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get my politics news elsewhere, and that's
Right.
fine. But like, it's always nice to go somewhere where you actually kind of feel like I'm not gonna be like angry
Right.
reading something here.
Yeah, exactly. I would say the most political it got was like the social good vertical,
Yeah.
which even just by virtue of supporting certain causes around social good, that is political in a way.
That is political,
But
but
like-
it feel good.
Well, but it's also issues first rather than like,
Like you're doing now. See, it
Yeah.
comes full circle.
yes, I suppose it does. It does.
Well, how do you end up at the Recount? What's
So I was at Morning Brew for a while.
Oh,
so
yeah, I
chief
did want to talk
content
about Morning
officer
Brew.
there.
I was looking when you were there in like 2021, right?
Yeah.
I was chief product officer of StockTwits at the time,
Mhm.
and we model a lot of our newsletter stuff up to what you were doing at Morning Brew at the same time. So I'm that because that business feels, I mean, it's newsletter based. It's very like, which
Totally.
is a great business, I think.
Mhm.
But they like are, I would say, one of the gold standard of that business.
Yeah.
That's a new thing for you. I mean, like, you're not running Mashable, you're not running Jezebel, you're not running this huge content site, though there is content.
Yeah.
What's that shift like?
Oh, wow. I just wanted to be away from .coms for a little bit. Like, I shouldn't say, like, not like, I still think they're like incredibly important, but a daily news diet that's just limited to this page view business model and commerce model. Like, Mashable had been acquired by Ziff Davis about halfway through my time there, and that changed things
Of course,
drastically.
you're back in the corporate world.
Well, it's
of
not just the
things.
corporate thing. I mean, it changed literally the very nature of our coverage and what sort of content we had to prioritize in order to align with our new publishing company's business priorities. Right? I mean, that's just the way it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But you know, I was to play the SEO game every time there's a new algorithm shift or a knowing that the errant keystroke of an engineer on the West Coast could completely change your fates and fortunes for an entire quarter. Like, that's really stressful.
Yeah, of course.
And I deeply empathize with anyone like working with that, and I totally understand it. But I just needed a breather.
Yeah.
Not like a forever breather, but I needed a breather right then. And I was really interested in what Morning Brew had done with voice and using voice as the primary channel to build loyalty. Like, there is a very real relationship between that Morning Brew audience and the newsletter editors and writers. And voice comes before all else. That's it. Like, and everyone in the business understands that, knows that, and respects that. And when I came in, it was to start building out the B2C operation for multimedia. You know, if voice is what has built a loyal audience in the newsletters, that's personality, right? That's person to person. That's about, you know, a reader feeling like they really know who's written that newsletter and really,
Yeah.
you know, we get each other. We've built that relationship. Well, the next obvious step from that would be, you know, in front of the camera and creators. So I was brought in to help build that out.
I mean, it's like paves the way for you, like to a video centric news site.
It was definitely like that bridge.
Yeah.
For sure. And that, yeah.
Do you feel like, I mean, what do you feel like you got most out of Morning Brew?
I feel like I got a very good understanding of the creator economy and working with talent in that creator space, what it requires of executives, what it requires of editors, what the creator expectations are, and like how to have a functional, thriving relationship with that. I think a lot of publishers are like, we're going to start working with creators. We're going to do like, no. Like, it's not that simple.
Right.
And like, it can be a very worthwhile endeavor. And like, we partner with some amazing people and acqui-hired some awesome, really talented people I'm so glad I got to work with. But it's not like as simple as like, hey, creator,
Right.
come do some stuff for us. Like, they don't need publishers. Like, if they're talented enough that you're reaching out to them,
Yeah.
they probably don't need you.
Right. You need that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is a dynamic that I think is perhaps unfamiliar to a lot of editors who are used to reaching out to writers.
Right. Who do need,
Yeah.
because they need the paycheck, and of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really beneficial.
So how does the Recount come about?
So I ended up taking a job with a company called the News Movement, which owns the Recount. And the News Movement was started about 3 years ago by a group of British media executives from like Dow Jones and BBC. And it was devoted purely to just telling the news on social and doing it with like very young journalists and speaking to like very Gen Z audiences. And I had never built anything from scratch. I'm usually the person who comes in for the pivot or the time to scale, etc.
Yeah.
And I felt like the one thing that was missing from my resume at that point was building a newsroom from scratch. So the newsroom that had existed when I came in was exclusively in London, and they wanted to build out a US operation. So I was brought in to do that. And I did that for about a year and a half. And during that time, the News Movement acquired the Recount. So the Recount has entered the fold. And about 6 months ago, during company reorg, like, all right, Recount's part of the family now. Let's really figure out how to make this work. Like, we've got our bread and butter of the US newsroom in place. Like, we've got staffing in place around like all the necessary verticals, etc. Now let's figure out how we staff to optimize. And that's when I moved over to the Recount.
Cool. And you're enjoying it.
I am.
That's
I
amazing.
am. It's an incredibly talented team, super passionate. And as we said earlier, it is not a boring time to be in this space.
No, I mean, as we kind of like think about, as we wrap this up a little bit, I'm just curious, like, what you think about how the next 7 months go, and I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, obviously, and
No, we do not.
but we do know that there are some people who are checked out, and
Mhm.
what is your goal as a journalist, as a leader, and as someone who is tapped into what's going on? Like, what do you think that you want to do, or that we all should be doing to make sure that people become aware?
I think one, as journalists, as editors, executives, we all have to be totally fine answering what we think is a dumb question.
Mhm.
It's not. Absolutely not. Some of these questions that people have, they're like, there are no dumb questions, but if, a large portion of audience is checked out, they're coming in at like the first episode
Right.
of a series, right? And we have to remember that. I think that's really important. A lot of studies have shown that when people start to engage with news, they feel that they've missed the plot, or they're coming in mid-story, or they're not getting enough context. And like, we need to make sure that everything we do assumes that, depending on the brand, like, they never know as much as we assume they do. We are so deep in our own bubbles of like subject matter expertise that we forget to put ourselves in the shoes of the audience and what it is like to consume whatever we're putting out into the ecosystem,
Yeah.
with the ecosystem looking like it does, which is a total, absolute batshit fire hose.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. That sounds, I mean, and I'm already like terrified.
No, I don't think there's anything terrifying about it. Just like you've seen it grow. And then I think the other thing is like remaining focused on what it all means. I said the stakes earlier. I'm going to return to that. Like
Yeah.
what this election could really mean. Like, let's really talk about what these platforms are. Let's also like make sure we highlight what has and hasn't happened from these politicians in the past. Like,
Yeah.
making sure that we are always directly connecting it, even if it's just implicit, to what it means for you, viewer, audience member, etc.
Consumer. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for doing this.
Thank you
It
so
was
much for
good to
having
see
me. I'm
you.
so sorry that the first round of Hendrix was weird.
No. I think it's
I mean,
good.
it
You know
was-
what? I think it was a bold choice. We tried it, and we learned. We learned a little something today.
I would say that fortune did not favor the bold.
No.
No.
But now
But-
we won't make that mistake again.
No, you live and you learn.
Exactly. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Story in a Bottle. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review for us in the iTunes store or wherever you listen. I'd like to thank our producers at 1459 Production Management and Charming Robots Eric Bowie for his continued production support.
And of course, I'd like to thank Jessica Cohen for graciously giving us her time.